if the most authentic voices in golden age country music were really stage props, carefully tuned like guitars before the lights came up? Picture a smoky Nashville studio in the late 50s. The producer leans over the console and says, almost casually, "Son, yank that drawl a little lower. Folks back in Tulsa need to hear the gravel." That single sentence shaped an entire era, and it set the stage for a cast of legends who would bend their vowels like steel strings to fit the myth. This story isn't about lip-syncing, it's about identity syncing. For 19 beloved stars, the Southern accent became both mask and megaphone. A sonic costume they zipped up every night to remind listeners they belonged to the same dusty two-lane dream. Today we pull back the curtain, peel off the twang, and listen to the raw, often surprising voices hiding underneath. Keep your ears open. By the end, you may never hear The Gambler or Harper Valley PTA the same way again. Back when AM radio still crackled across cornfields, programmers treated a Southern drawl like a passport stamp. No twang, no airplay. Labels mailed etiquette sheets that read, in so many words, "Sound rural, sell records." Outsiders obliged. Brooklyn-born Eddie Rabbitt showed up first with a songwriter's notebook and a Brooklyn lilt, but after watching deals evaporate, he softened his R's, dipped his vowels, and suddenly, "Drivin' My Life Away" drove straight to #1. Lee Greenwood, a California kid, reached for patriotism so fierce that even his voice saluted. The moment he rolled the word USA off a borrowed drawl, barroom jukeboxes lit up like fireworks. And when New Jersey's Juice Newton realized her pop country crossover needed deeper roots, she sprinkled just enough Georgia red clay into lines like Queen of Hearts to convince listeners she'd grown up on a porch swing instead of the Jersey Shore. The game was set. Bend the accent, win the audience. But not everyone started from scratch. Take Kenny Rogers. Houston bred him, yet his early days were full of psychedelic rock riffs and perfectly neutral diction. When the first edition faded, he reinvented himself under the neon of a different stage. The beard thickened, the vowels widened, and suddenly Kenny sounded like he had hauled feed in Alabama his whole life. Listeners believed every gamble he sang about because the accent sold the grit. Conway Twitty managed an even bigger pivot. Born in Mississippi but raised across the river in Arkansas, Twitty first chased Elvis on the rock and roll charts with a smoother Mid-South tone. Yet Nashville gatekeepers pegged him as a pop crooner until he doubled down on the drawl. He'd step to the mic, let a syrupy "Hello, darlin'" trickle out, and suddenly the Opry audience felt like he'd pulled up beside them at a small-town stoplight. Accents, it turned out, could rewrite biographies faster than any press release, and the fans ate it up. But some artists wielded twang not as disguise, but as punchline. Roy Clark learned that lesson inside the hay bale skits of Hee Haw. Born in rural Virginia but raised on Air Force bases, his natural timbre hovered somewhere between East Coast crisp and Southern soft. On television, though, he cranked the cornpone to 11, letting long O's hang like laundry on a line. The exaggerated twang punctuated every joke as if the syllables themselves wore overalls. His pick-in partner Jerry Reed played the same card. Offstage, Reed's speech bounced between Atlanta street cadence and almost radio-neutral English, but on screen he leaned so far into the aw shucks persona that even his guitar solos seemed to smile. Viewers laughed with them, never questioning authenticity because the accent was the joke. Comedy gave twang permission to roam free. Yet on the darker edge of the dial, One Man in Black used accent the way a lighting director uses shadows, sparingly for maximum drama. Johnny Cash, raised in Arkansas cotton country, actually spoke with a measured, almost preacher-like clarity. But step onto a stage and the baritone sank into midnight, syllables stretching as if weighed down by prison chains. The shift amplified his rebel myth. An audience could feel fulsome steel in a single vowel. Northern transplant Bobby Bare noticed. Born in Ohio, Bare rolled into town with Yankee consonants he feared would clang against honky-tonk ears. So he studied street vendors, truck stops, anything that offered hometown twang, and soon Detroit City sounded like it had floated off the Mississippi Delta. Nebraska's Tom Paul Glazer followed suit. To ride alongside Waylon and Willie, He coated his Midwestern syllables in thick smoke and red dirt until even critics forgot his Cornhusker roots. In the outlaw era, authenticity was less about birthplace and more about how convincingly you could narrate a bar fight at 2 a.m. Still, not every vocal makeover aimed for menace. Some were crafted to glisten under rhinestone spotlight. Crystal Gale, Loretta Lynn's kid sister, was already Kentucky through and through, but her speaking voice carried a gentle mid-Appalachian lilt, not the buttery drawl she poured over "Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue." Producers encouraged her to sweeten the accent so every note dripped Southern charm. It worked. Overnight, she became country's porcelain doll. A decade earlier, Skeeter Davis faced similar pressure. Interviews reveal she chattered with a spry, almost Midwestern brightness, yet when the record light blinked, she painted on molasses-thick vowels to reassure disc jockeys she belonged between Patsy and Kitty on the playlist. Jeannie C. Riley, a Texas native, already owned a Twang but discovered that cranking it just a notch higher after Harper Valley PTA cemented her as the feisty small-town heroine fans imagined. And Tanya Tucker, barely a teenager when fame hit, boosted her Texas rasp into a rebellious snarl, letting each elongated syllable hint at barroom stories she was far too young to live. In an industry run by men, accent became armor, a way to signal authenticity without surrendering power, but sometimes the voice coding hid quieter secrets. North Carolina's Don Gibson entered studios in the 50s with a surprisingly restrained accent, almost nasally flat. Yet as hits stacked up, the twang deepened. Listen to early interview reels and you'll notice the contrast. Radio Don sounds like home-fried cornbread. Off-air Don could pass for a hotel clerk in Cincinnati. Texas crooner Gene Watson used the inverse trick. On stage, he pushed his vowels wide as plowed fields, but fans meeting him backstage sometimes did a double take at the smoother cadence that slipped out once the lights dimmed. Meanwhile, B.J. Thomas, roaming from pop to gospel to country, treated accent like wardrobe. Early crossover smashes showcased only a hint of Oklahoma tint. Later, eager to secure country award nominations, he let drawl seep into every lyric until "Somebody Done Somebody Wrong" song sounded as if recorded on a porch swing. Accents shifted with chart positions and nobody questioned it. Yet the most dramatic transformations came from artists who began worlds away from the Mason-Dixon line. Eddie Rabbitt grew up dodging cabs in Brooklyn, nowhere near cotton fields, but he loved Hank Snow records and believed Nashville held the future. Rumor says that during his first Music Row meeting, an executive praised his songwriting, then suggested, half joking, that he lose the city sound. Within months, Rabbitt re-emerged sporting a subtle Appalachian roll that never quite matched any specific region, yet felt familiar enough to sell. Fans were none the wiser until a tabloid dug up his high school yearbook and discovered class president speeches without a hint of twang. Juice Newton faced harsher skepticism. Reviewers tagged her New Jersey origins in every write-up, claiming she'd never break the Nashville ceiling. She responded by blending California country rock tones with just enough Carolina sugar to make stations bite. Angel of the Morning glided across formats, and skeptics fell silent. Lee Greenwood took a strategic approach. He studied George Jones' interviews, mapped the vowel lengths, and rehearsed nightly until the anthem "God Bless the USA" sounded like it had been born under a Tennessee fireworks show. No one questioned lineage when the flag flew that high. Still, for a few acts, accent wasn't choice or comedy. It was survival in a world built on storytelling. Dan Seals spent the 70s atop pop charts as half of England Dan and John Ford Coley, singing soft rock with a whispery neutral tone. When the duo dissolved, Seals aimed for country redemption. Managers warned that audiences still viewed him as a Los Angeles yacht rock crooner. Seals retreated to an East Texas ranch, surrounded himself with locals, and practiced until each interview sounded like it was delivered from a pickup bed under a Friday night stadium light. The gamble paid off. Bop and everything that glitters vaulted him back into stardom. Ronnie Millsap, blind since birth, had a more subtle dance with dialect. His speaking voice hovered near standard American, law school crisp, but co-wrote ballads draped in smoky mountain longing. Engineers say he'd record a line, play it back, then repeat it with softer consonants until the song breathed Tennessee breeze. The result felt authentic because emotion, not geography, carried it. Even so, every tweak reflected a broader tension. How much of ourselves do we edit to fit the story listeners want? Fast forward to today, where forgotten archival interviews resurface on YouTube faster than bootleg tapes once traded hands. Fans binge old press junkets and suddenly notice that Conway's baritone thins when he's chatting with Dick Clark, or that Kenny's backstage banter sounds strangely city slick. Comment threads light up. Did y'all know Eddie Rabbitt was from New York? One viral montage even overlays Johnny Cash speaking in near-neutral early career tones, with later concerts dripping with baritone gravel. Viewers argue for days over when the shift occurred. The digital microscope makes fakery seem scandalous, but context matters. Many artists weren't lying, they were curating the same way guitarists chose particular amps or wore signature hats. In the mid-century South, authenticity was a currency you could mint with your tongue. And the audience was a willing accomplice, eager to believe. Yet there's another layer to the tale, one that blurs the boundary between branding and becoming. Linguists call it style shifting, a natural human instinct to mirror the voices around us. Spend a summer in Georgia and you pick up the cadence like pollen on your boots. These country stars simply wielded that instinct with professional precision. Ask insiders and they'll tell you Conway Twitty could glide between accents in one conversation, calibrating to whomever he was courting: DJs, label reps, bar owners. Some bandmates claimed Kenny Rogers would start the tour in neutral tones and, by the final Alabama date, sound like he'd been raised one county over from the fans. It wasn't deception so much as connection, a sonic handshake. The risk came when the handshake hardened into handcuffs. A few veterans confessed privately that they'd wake up in hotel rooms unsure which voice to greet the mirror with. One stage manager joked that Tanya Tucker's drawl was so thick during her wild child years that he once asked her to translate her own lyric sheet. She laughed, then nailed the show. Adaptation, after all, is survival, and country music has always been part theater, part therapy. Still, every performance has a closing chord. When modern stars like Morgan Wallen or Casey Musgraves flip effortlessly between mainstream pop interviews and thick hometown drawls and backstage hangouts, they're following a blueprint laid down by Roy Clark's comic timing and Crystal Gale's velvet intonation. Branding hasn't gone away, it has just migrated to TikTok snippets and late-night talk show banter. Audiences, however, are more fluent in media literacy now. Is that accent real? Floods comment sections the moment a new single drops. Yet streams keep rising, tickets keep selling, and the conversation itself becomes part of the marketing cycle. In a genre that romanticizes small-town roots even as it tours global arenas, the tension between origin and aspiration is baked into every steel guitar bend. What matters, perhaps, is not whether a singer was born within earshot of cicadas, but whether the story they tell makes us feel the night air swaying through cotton. If the illusion stirs genuine emotion, is it still an illusion or just a different kind of truth? The line is blurry, and that blur hums like reverb beneath every classic track. Consider a bootleg cassette traded at truck stops in the early 90s. It captures a sound check where Johnny Cash, tired from a red-eye flight, runs through Ring of Fire in a casual register that sounds almost Midwestern. Someone on the tape chuckles and Cash fires back, half joking, "Don't worry, I'll put the molasses on for the crowd." Minutes later, the official recording begins, and the man in black unleashes the recognizable rumble that rattles arena rafters. That flip of a switch demonstrates how accent functioned like stage lighting. The same duality-colored darker rumors, too. When Conway Twitty suffered his fatal aneurysm, fans swore the hospital footage revealed the faintest Yankee tinge, igniting conspiracy threads that he'd practiced his drawl right up until the ambulance doors closed. Other legends carried secrets unrelated to speech. Accusations surfaced about backroom deals, hush-hush affairs, or substances that led some to OD'd behind velvet curtains. Listeners forgave plenty, but an exposed fake accent could generate outrage rivaling any moral scandal. Authenticity, it seemed, mattered more than purity. And what happened next would shock everyone. In 1983, a Memphis morning show host invited Eddie Rabbitt for what was billed as a casual on-air chat before his concert. Coffee steamed, red on-air light blinked, and Rabbitt, still warming up, answered the first question in his natural Brooklyn cadence. Phone lines exploded. Some callers felt betrayed, others marveled at his versatility, but everyone kept talking, and by nightfall the box office had to add folding chairs. Controversy sold tickets just as surely as Twang once sold authenticity. Record labels noticed and began quietly scripting unmasking moments into press campaigns. A controlled reveal here, a playful accent switch during late-night television there. The balancing act became performance art. Artists who surfaced after the 90s, like Shania Twain or Keith Urban, navigated accent politics in real time, sometimes flattening their vowels to appeal to broader pop markets, then dialing them back for Opry nights. The audience, increasingly global, carried its own medley of dialects and cared less about zip codes than about whether a hook felt authentic to the heart. The dialect stakes shifted, but the core question lingered. Do we crave truth, or do we crave a truth-sounding melody? Maybe the better way to weigh that question is to step outside the studio and into a roadside bar on the outskirts of nowhere. It is past midnight, the neon beer sign flickers, and the house band is tearing through Lucille. The singer, a retiree who spent decades fixing tractors, growls the chorus with a roomy East Tennessee accent, even though his birth certificate says Cleveland, Ohio. No one objects. A couple slow dances near the pool table. An oil field worker hums along, imagining the cracked white lines of the interstate ahead. In that moment, the borrowed drawl feels less like deception and more like hospitality, a thing offered to make strangers feel at home. Country music has always trafficked in that kind of emotional shorthand. Steel guitars imitate tears, fiddles mimic laughter, and sometimes throats reshape syllables to sound like front porch midnight even inside concrete arenas. When the illusion lands, it sparks a shared memory between singer and listener, whether or not either ever picked cotton or chased fireflies. The longing is real, and maybe longing is what counts. But the same scene can unravel if the performance slips into caricature. Nothing kills a honky-tonk hush faster than the moment an accent turns cartoonish, revealing artifice instead of art. The ear knows the difference, even if the tongue can't explain it. That instinct keeps the ritual honest, or at least honest enough. So the next time God Bless the USA echoes across a county fair, or Queen of Hearts pours out of a roadside diner jukebox, listen a little closer, hear the subtle craft hidden in each rounded vowel, the strategic hesitation before a hard R, the hush of a consonant softened to dust. You're not just hearing an accent, you're hearing a choice, a negotiation, maybe even a confession. And once you spot it, you can't unhear it, which leads to the final question that hangs in the night like the last cymbal crash. Does knowing the secret spoil the magic, or does it make the magic more miraculous because now you understand how deliberately it was cast? Only you can decide, but either way, the jukebox is spinning again, and the next verse, accent and all, is already waiting for you tonight. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.